Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Pittsboro Board of Commissioners to order for August 12, 2024. And as our tradition, we'll start with a moment of silence. Thank you. Commissioner Farrell, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
May everyone rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the agenda ahead of us. Is there any changes to the consent agenda or the regular agenda? All right.
I should make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrell. Second?
Second.
Commissioner Foley, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Commissioner Farrell. Second. Commissioner Foley, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have two informational items tonight. The Boys and Girls Club report and the ABC store financial report. Any questions on those items? All right. Thank you. We are down to ceremonial items. We have two resolutions this evening. The first one is for Child Protection Awareness Day. So this is a resolution declaring August 16th as Child Protection Awareness Day in Pittsboro. Whereas the town of Pittsboro is committed to the safety, well-being, and protection of all of its residents, particularly the young children. And whereas ensuring the safety of our children is of utmost importance, especially raising awareness about the impact of sexual assault on child victims. And whereas valuing the need for education, prevention, and support services for victims of sexual assault is crucial to ensure a safe and supportive community. And whereas advocating for awareness and understanding of the issue can lead to a more effective prevention strategies, a stronger support network for victims and their families, and strict measures to deter future crimes. And whereas nurturing a community environment where all children can grow up safely, free from the threat of sexual violence and abuse is a priority for the town of Pittsboro. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and Board of Commissioners for the town of Pittsboro declares August 16th as Child Protection Awareness Day in the town of Pittsboro, and encourages all residents, organizations, and businesses to participate in activities and programs that promote awareness, prevention, and support for child victims of sexual assault. Be it further resolved, we reaffirm our commitment to providing resources, support, and a safe environment for all children in our community. And that's adopted this 12th day of August.
We need a motion to approve the resolution as stated.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. A second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Farrell. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next up is a resolution declaring August 26, 2024 as Women's Equality Day in Pittsboro. Whereas August 26, 2024 marks the 104th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which granted some women the right to vote. And whereas it is important to acknowledge that women of color had to wait an additional 45 years until the passage of the Voting Rights Act to receive their right to vote. And whereas Women's Equality Day celebrates the progress made towards gender equality and acknowledges the ongoing efforts needed to achieve full equality. And whereas the town of Pittsboro recognizes the valuable contributions of women in our community and supports the continued advancement of women's rights. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and the Board of Commissioners for the town of Pittsboro declares August 16, 2024 as Women's Equality Day in the town of Pittsboro. We encourage all residents to celebrate the achievements of women and to continue working towards gender equality.
Motion to approve resolution declaring Women's Equality Day in Pittsboro, North Carolina.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Bonitz, welcome. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Up next is Citizens Matters. We will start with the manager's update.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick, we are looking at a community change grant. Colby's taking the lead on this of the COG. This will be looking at pedestrian improvements, historic education and stormwater throughout town. That is likely to be a $10 to $20 million application. We're pretty confident in checking all the boxes there. If not, we'll apply again the following year. The skate park fundraising has been fairly successful. We've actually, with partnership with the skate park nonprofit, raised more than what we need. So we are now going to try to raise a little bit more to then build the shade structure that was shown on the concept C. And so working with Tony right now on that. Stormwater cleanup, I think storm debris cleanup with staff went very well throughout the hurricane. I think they did a great job. Just wanted to publicly acknowledge that. And they jumped on the repair at the Pittsboro Elementary School bridge, we'll call it. They put in a removable fill, which is like a concrete that can be dug out pretty easily. And that should be asphalted Wednesday and should be open by the end of the week, we hope. So that will be ready to go before school starts. That is all I have. And then we'll hand it over to Colby to just give you an update on the hurricane and what all we did and move through it.
Yeah, I'd like to just thank staff for everything that was done during that to prepare for the storm and then to make the cleanup and everything easier. So Colby, more detailed update.
So thank y'all for having me up here. First off, I want to say thank you for your support as we work through this event. Debbie was only a tropical storm when it impacted us, but we saw how significant the impacts were. It reminds us that when we look at these storms, hopefully it reminds our community as well, that we don't just look at wind speed, we don't just look at category, we actually look at the impacts. And when we say that we're going to have problems, that doesn't just mean wind related problems. So a little bit about Debbie. We began monitoring that as the town on Wednesday, July 31st, when that was still just a tropical wave over the Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center issued their first advisory Friday, August the 2nd. Our internal team, leadership team, what we call an incident management team, had our first meeting on August the 5th, which was Monday. And we had, of course, impacts primarily on Thursday, although we did start seeing some rain and light winds Wednesday evening. Flooding was the main story with this storm. We had a significant flooding of some roads. We did have to close Oakwood. We did have to close Thompson, and we had the impacts at the Pittsboro Elementary School bridge. I can happily report Oakwood and Thompson were back open the following morning, if not the night of, and you've just done another repair at Pittsboro Elementary School road. We did have Town Lake Park experience some pretty significant overtopping of the dam. The dam did exactly what it was supposed to do and held the water back. We want to make sure that dam is okay. So we do have an engineer coming from North Carolina Department of Public Safety, a dam safety engineer, to take a look at it. Just make sure everything looks right. We're in contact with them, but we expect everything to be fine there. Of course, we also had to close the Greenway for quite some time because of the flooding of Robeson Creek. Greenway is back open as of my last update. That is pretty well clean. Throughout that event, law enforcement did experience numerous calls, mostly related to power surges and alarms going off and whatnot. Shorty's staff worked wonderfully through those, did a great job. And then I meant to mention the trees as well. We did have numerous large trees down that affected traffic or affected transportation. Those were Pittsboro Elementary School Road, North Masonic, Hillsboro, 87 at Town Lake, and 87 at Sanford Road. All in all, we removed about 80 cubic yards of vegetation out of our vegetative materials, trees, out of our roadways. So overall, everything went very well, especially given that this was the first time that we have worked using this new model of incident management here in the town. I could not be prouder of the team here. I could not be prouder of all of the staff and all of their hard work. Again, thank you for your support through all this and helping us get our message out. Next steps, we're going to be looking at some additional free training for our employees, some things that they should probably have anyway. So we're going to make sure everyone has at least got a good foothold on how we respond to these types of storms. And then we will be doing an after action review and improvement plan where we take a deep dive into everything that we did and we say, here's what we thought was going to happen. Here's what actually happened. Here was the difference and how do we fix it? So we'll be taking a deep look at that. That's all I have unless you have any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I'd like to commend you, the staff, our town manager, assistant town manager for what they've done in reference to this. This was something that Pittsboro did not have, but it was very, very important. And I really do appreciate you acknowledging all the things that could go on with the situation and that the residents will have an idea of what's going on. And I really do appreciate the heads up on all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think we have a unique combination, maybe statewide, of PIO and emergency management, and they are directly tied together, and it really benefits us. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Up next is my update. So, community presentations, I was able to speak in Siler City, so summer IT internship program, and talk to them about some of the opportunities. On July 29th, Mayor Pro Tem and I had a meeting with the county and some joint government coordination there. It's really went well. And then August 1st here was a emerging issues forum put on by NC State that is working on workforce development in the state and how we can continue to excel at workforce development, what that means for economic development. I went to a Hunt State Policy Fellow training, which is focused on K-12 education and how we can continue to lead and improve on that. And then, where was this? Oh, with the EPA subcommittee, Small Community Subcommittee, we had a meeting on August 2nd, and it was actually about some new EPA guidance about restructuring. So I was able to give them some relevant information, hopefully, about small systems merging and becoming, viable systems through mergers. So that's going to be some guidance that's coming out from the EPA. It's out for public comment right now. And I'm also participating in a cybersecurity task force for the EPA. This Friday, there is finally Friday all throughout downtown in the plant. And there is a banana split eating contest at 5:30 at Havoc. So don't bet on me, but I'll be there. That's all I have. Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin.
Actually, I do not have that much other than what you reiterated about the meeting with the county officials. That was a very good meeting. And we do appreciate that the town manager was there, the assistant county manager, you and I, and it was very good. The chairman of the Chatham County Board of Commissioners, she was there, and also one other commissioner. So we did discuss a lot of things in terms of what the county's doing, what town of Pittsboro is doing. It was a very productive meeting, I think. In reference to the Central Pines Regional Council, we're on a little vacation. The next meeting won't be until about the end of August. And also what's coming up is the Chatham County Fair, and that will be in September. And I encourage everyone to put your plants, your vegetables that you've grown, everything on the exhibit so you can get a blue ribbon. I got a blue ribbon last year for one of my plants. So I want to encourage you all to grow something and just bring it out and just have a good time. It's around the 1st of September. So you will be getting more.
Knitting.
Hmm?
Can I enter my knitting?
Yes, you can. So that's all that I have for right now.
Commissioner Bonitz.
Yes, thank you. Nothing substantive to report from the last Climate Advisory Committee meeting, and the next upcoming meeting is on the 22nd. So I'll report out from that.
Thank you. Commissioner Farrell.
Nothing to report. I would just like to iterate, as everyone has said, the good job that the staff has all done during this storm time and all. And we still got a lot of debris to be picked up, but that's understanding. Thanks again.
Thank you. Commissioner Foley.
A couple things, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee of Chatham County. Updates, we have a new community development officer who is directing the business of affordable housing in Chatham County, isn't it? Jamie Andrews is that person. And Jamie will be leading and supporting the advisory committee in the future. This last meeting, we had also the guidance of the assistant county manager there to support us. That's Brian Thompson. And Teresa Thompson as well. She gave a great summation of what the town's affordable housing policy will be in the future. And her feedback was much welcome there. So we're kind of excited about where we're going there. Also, we have two new members. Both members have a great deal of experience. One was a former commissioner, town commissioner, city commissioner of Durham with 8 to 10 years of experience in affordable housing. And also a transfer from the city of Miami. And he is all about bond issues and fundraising for money for affordable housing in the area. So a lot going on there. I attended the Gen X seminar for bloodborne sampling for PFAS. It was quite an interesting seminar. What it was about was there is an organization that's collecting blood samples for people up and down the Cape Fear River Basin. Pittsboro is part of that. I think there's probably 70 or 80 residents of the town of Pittsboro that donated blood samples. And so what they are doing is tracking the evolution or the movement of PFAS up and down the Cape Fear River Basin. And actually what is ingested in people's bodies. So I will continue to monitor that. It's quite interesting. And lastly, I was at the Medley ribbon cutting at Northwood Landing. It's a new apartment complex next to the Lowe's shop grocery store. Really beautiful garden style apartments. We got a tour. Chatham Park was there and the owners and the builders of the property. Great amenities. The really positive part about it from my standpoint, my opinion, is the affordability of those apartments. 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, $1,400 for a 1 bedroom. I know that's not $900, but it's a great start. So welcome to the town of Pittsboro, Northwood Landing. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Nice to see Commissioner Vose is not able to be with us this evening. I think he had a beach to be at. So we have to move the meeting there, but up next is public comment. So when you come up, please state your name and address at the start of your comments. There's a time limit of 3 minutes, which will be displayed on the screen. In the interest of time and fairness, it is the board's policy not to respond directly to comments during this period, but our staff will follow up as appropriate. So up first is Jillian, and next, Jillian, and next will be William.
Okay. My name is Jillian Tero. I live at 48 Breezewood Court. And unfortunately, this is not going to be as much fun of a discussion as blue ribbons at the fair. I am a resident at Powderstone Village here in Pittsboro, and I live at 48 Breezewood Court on the cul-de-sac at the lowest point of the street. Before I discuss my concerns regarding communication and the handling of the sewer pipe placed in the greenway behind our home, I wanted to share a little backstory. I've spoken to a few of you just recently, so please bear with me if you've heard it before. Prior to purchasing our home, we looked at the overall neighborhood, town, and immediate areas surrounding what would become our property. Nice neighborhood, up and coming town, great location. There's a greenway along the back of our property. We researched the greenway on the One Pittsboro Park and Recreation System master plan of March 2019. We noted that there is significant water pooling and damage in the rear of the property, but decided to move forward as that can be addressed. And we did address it. We spent more than $50,000 installing 2 retaining walls, a box drain, and a French drain. It was well worth it, and the water quickly flowed to the culvert and creek in the greenway before running into Turkey Creek, which is a protected watershed. Fast forward to late July of this year, when residents started hearing and experiencing the destruction in the greenway behind them. In no time at all, the area from East Cornwallis all the way to Bridle Path was cleared. And I mean cleared. Large mature trees were shredded, underbrush and all natural landscaping gone. Left was a drivable area and mountains and mountains and mountains of wood chips. The land was cleared up to the homeowner's property line, regardless of trees immediately on the property line adjacent. Shortly after this section was completed, 3 trees with estimated height of 80 to 120 feet fell on the Duke power line. The easement's right next to it, but nobody has ventured into that area, causing a partial town outage. And still the work continued. Not a single resident was contacted about this work beforehand. Debbie arrived, and boy, did she arrive. And it was easy to see the functionality of that greenway. The edge of our property had a newly formed waterfall that continued until 4 a.m. And I know because I could hear it inside my house. This waterfall had never been here before. Moving forward, I'm here to talk about communication and doing things right for your residents. There should have been clear communication with the neighborhood, particularly the residents who have property that back up to this greenway regarding this installation, and that did not happen. Communication is a great thing because not only does it provide information, but it allows the sharing of knowledge. Bert, was my time up?
I'll give her my time. I'm scheduled to speak. Can I just give her my time so she can complete her thoughts?
I've done this.
I'll see what you're with.
Okay.
Communication is a great thing because not only does it provide information, but it allows the sharing of knowledge. For example, that dry trail lake area and the 12-foot culvert behind the houses on Breezewood Court have a purpose. This area manages the water that runs from the lowest point in the neighborhood from a good portion of Potterstone Village. It runs all the way to Turkey Creek, again, a protected watershed. Yes, when you walk it and survey it, when it hasn't rained in 3 weeks, it looks like a nice little worn path. When you observe it during a storm, and not a tropical storm, not a hurricane, but just your average rainstorm, you see the functionality, you see the purpose. The purpose is to move a large quantity of water quickly from the area. We could have shared all that information with you prior to the start of your project. Communication helps manage perception. The perception is that the destruction of the greenway trees, natural habitat, water flow, and protected watershed, not to mention private property, isn't important. Quote, the work is permitted and will eventually continue. The perception is that this delay is costing Chatham Park developers a lot of money, and every day that that excavation machinery sits, it costs money. We have been told this by at least 3 different town, county, and engineer people. This has been communicated, giving the perception that Chatham Park South development is the primary focus, not the current and long-term residents of Pittsboro. Communication allows us to see when there's a pattern or behavior. For example, when promises are given but not honored. The contractor and developer have worked diligently to address all the property owner concerns and plan for the proper project execution. That was August 7th. Many residents haven't received responses. Some people have from some people. We also have a comprehensive schedule of follow-up actions for the contractor to avoid direct future impact on private properties. The next day, many private properties had direct impact as a result of the mismanagement of the stormwater. After this walkthrough, Ben Schmecke of our staff will be sending a summary email to all the owners for which we have an email address. To my knowledge, no summary email was sent. Communication allows us to move forward and right the wrongs. We are asking that Pittsboro install the sewer pipe in an environmentally and community amenable way that honors the residents who have lived here, not just those who are going to arrive. Listen to the people who are bringing the concerns to you. Come walk the Greenway. I'm happy to clear my schedule. Jonathan has my number. Come walk it with me. Do the right thing, right the wrong, honor your residents. We are here. Jean has been here
17 years. Because we were told it was a dedicated greenway behind us. That's where we built our house. So
Jean, what's
when we,
your last name?
Jean McGregor,
She's 51.
51 Breezewood Court.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. William?
Bill and I are gonna switch order of operations, if that's okay. I'm Emily Eason.
Okay.
Emily, what's your last name?
Eason, E-A-S-O-N. I'm a resident at 36 Bristol Court. Thank you all for being here and hearing everything that we have to say, first of all. I really just have a question, and it's something that I'm hoping, we've asked it before, but we haven't gotten a response on this particular piece of what's happening, which is like the area behind Breezewood Court in particular is where this line is crossing what our developer deeded to the town as a dedicated greenway. There isn't a utility easement on it that we can find. And the deed, like if you pull up the deed and you look at it, it says dedicated greenway. And I'm not sure what the definition of that is legally, but how can it be a greenway if this is what has happened to it? And if the use of that particular piece of land was changed for this project, it's not in the public records anywhere. Like, I would like somebody to address the legality of this sewer line crossing what now can never be a greenway. Like, once this is in, it will never be able to be made into a greenway. There's little vents that pop up every 100 feet. Like, it's not like we can go in and make it a greenway after this is over. It'll be a giant swath of grass that is only cut once a year. That runs all the way up to our property lines. So that's my only question. I know that you guys can't answer in this meeting, but if somebody could reach out to residents about that particular piece, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, come on.
My name is William Chappell, 47 Breezewood Court. So Mayor Shipp, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak to you this evening about the sewer line installment behind or directly to the east of Potterstone Village. So as some of the residents of Potterstone Village, and as Emily is the president of the HOA committee for Potterstone Village, I am the vice president. So we get a lot of questions that came to us from our residents, to which we could not answer, because as you've heard, there has been zero communication. Apparently, this process was put in place in late 2017, 2018, from what we've heard from random people. Up until this point, we still have not heard anything up until a week ago when we actually heard the trees being cut down. And that's the first time we had heard that there was a sewer line coming in. No communication was given to the HOA, no communication was given to the residents. There's a whole host of concerns that we as residents of Potterstone Village have, none of which I can cover in 3 minutes. However, the overarching ones were communication. The fact that this seems to be rushed in, I'm sure it may have taken a while for paperwork to get pushed around, but none of it was communicated to us. And it seems to be that it's, as Jillian pointed out, rushed through because the developer is costing them money to do that, okay, to wait. The fact that they are rushing through, at least, me as a scientist, if I'm planning an experiment, you have to make sure your plan, your experiment is well laid out before you go proceed with it. This did not seem well laid out, because there seems to be a lot of times where we meet with individuals behind our homes, show them the property, and they look at it and they have an oh moment. Okay, that something's not right. This does not match our plans. So the fact that, yes, some engineers went through there and looked on a map and said, this looks like a good place to put it, and actually walking back there and seeing what is there, those two don't come together. Okay, they don't match up. All right, from what we've understood from the individuals that we've met with already, that the fact that they've actually laid eyes on the property now and see everything that's back there, they're having to rework or re-engineer, and they're doing this in a week's time. So something that has taken whatever engineers, however many years to figure this out, they're now trying to move that around in a week's time just because it's costing the developer money. Okay, that doesn't make sense. And again, throughout this entire process, no one has been communicated directly to, not the HOA, not our management group, not the residents directly. Again, piecemeal conversations is all we've had. Okay, and even within that conversation, we're getting different stories from different individuals, from the developer to the county to the town. Each person has a different little bit of information that's coming through that doesn't really match. And we would like to have this so that cohesively, we actually have an idea of what's going on, what's happening, have anyone with a staked interest in this to come back there and actually look at the property and see what's going on and what will be disturbed. That's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Christopher?
Evening. My name is Christopher Tadero. I live at 48 Breezewood Court, Pittsboro, North Carolina. A bunch of my neighbors and community members have spoken about the wide-scale land clearing and disruption that's happened to our neighborhood of Potterstone Village for the sewer line that's really for the benefit of another community. I'm not going to speak directly to the impact of the project as others have in detail, but I do want to state how disappointed I am with the members of this board and with the officials and the leadership of the town of Pittsboro. When this clearing began nearly 2 weeks ago, numerous neighbors, community members, including myself, called, messaged, sent emails to our officials, our town officials, our elected officials, and we asked, can you come meet with us? We have questions. Can we discuss this? Nobody responded, except for Commissioner Farrell, who said he was out of town. So appreciate that a little bit. You asked us to vote to represent you in the town of Pittsboro matters, and we felt like we feel like we've been ignored. Furthermore, when residents were finally able to engage with town officials of this project, the project was defended and a lot of our concerns were dismissed. Shall I remind you that you work for us, not a private developer? The residents of Potterstone Village has been a consistent tax base to this community for nearly 20 years that funds the salaries, that funds the operations, that funds all of the things that Kobe talked about. We've been here. And we've been good residents. On the website, members of this board for this town represent nearly a dozen different committees. There are three to four business development and economic development committees. There's a social and arts committee. There's a green energy committee, but there is no committee that addresses community concerns that engages with our community. Mayor Shipp, you have a letter to the community on the website. And you say, quote, Pittsboro is a treasure trove of history, culture, nature, and community, but we're clear cutting existing trees in a wooded area, disrupting a dry federal streams. We're in a protected watershed, and not to mention disrupting the quality of life for a longstanding community. All of this for the benefit of a private developer. In that letter, you mentioned enhancing transportation with sidewalks and greenways. The town is disregarding the dedicated greenway use as deeded. They're in these parcels and repurposing it as a utility easement. You focus on the town, focus on maintaining the essence of our town while welcoming new opportunities with open arms. You are not engaging with the residents. You're allowing this disruption to existing neighborhoods and continually allowing for short-sighted decision-making that impact the whole community. My ask for this body and our town officials is to simply do better. Engage and communicate with your constituents. Bring them into the planning process, stop making decisions in a vacuum, and consider the impact of these broad-scale developments to the whole community, the little parts of the community, like the corner of my neighborhood, and the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is our miscellaneous section. We have a presentation from Davenport on the Pittsboro debt model.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for having me this evening. Mitch Bergoglio with Davenport and Company. We have served as the town's financial advisor. And this evening, we're bringing to you some informational material on capital funding and not looking for any action tonight. This is start of a process for looking at a long-term capital funding plan, which will ultimately, as y'all know, be part of your budget process next year. Three major concepts that I think I'm going to try to cover this evening, just again, for background purposes. Capital funding capacity, capital funding options, and capital funding affordability. And all three of these items kind of work together with one another in developing an overall capital funding plan. So I think—
Can we stop for a minute?
Yes, sir.
I have to apologize. Your presentation is spot on, but I just want to thank the folks that came from Breezewood specifically. We as a board heard what you said. And we don't want to move on without acknowledging that. We are here for you and we understand what you're saying. So thank you for your input and we will do our best. And we apologize for the disruption. And that's it for now.
Thank you. Please continue.
Well, in front of you, I think y'all have hard copies of this presentation and it's up on the screen as well. I'm going to hit this at a high level tonight, again, for background purposes. Happy that there's probably a little more information in here than I'll speak to this evening, and certainly happy to be available for questions afterwards and as a follow-up. But if I'm going too fast or hitting it too high level, obviously feel free to stop me along the way. Okay. So I'm going to start here on talking off of page 4 of this presentation. And this is that first leg. This is going to start to hit that first leg of what I wanted to cover this evening: capital funding capacity. Part of that is debt funding capacity, borrowing capacity. And one of the things that I think is helpful to talk about this is relating it to our personal lives, right? So as a town, you all are looking to fund a lot of capital projects, large projects throughout the years. But in our personal lives, oftentimes that means our home, right? The biggest investment we often make is our home. And so when we think about equating this to the decision process we go through in buying a home, one of the first things that we have to do is get pre-qualified from a bank for a mortgage if we're going to take out a mortgage to buy that home. And so in the municipal world, kind of the equivalent of going out and getting pre-qualified from a bank is understanding what your credit ratings are, or what your credit is, how banks and lenders will look at your credit. And so one of the ways in the municipal world that we look at that is a credit rating. You all do not have a credit rating because you have not needed one. You have not issued bonds in the public markets. That's the only time that you really need to have a credit rating. However, banks, lenders will also do their own internal credit rating process and establish an internal credit rating to themselves if you look to go to buy money from a bank. So that's kind of the baseline for the first concept that we're going to look at. What is the town's credit? Do you have the ability to access the capital markets, or do you have the ability to borrow money? And just as a little bit of perspective on that, page 5 gives you a list of all of the cities and towns in North Carolina that are rated, have a national credit rating. One of those national credit rating agencies is Moody's Investor Service. And here within North Carolina, all the cities and towns who have a rating are either the highest rating of AAA or the second highest rating category of AA. And based upon what we've seen and talked through with staff, we think you're likely in that AA category. Be thinking about that. So that's a good indication that you have the ability to borrow money if you choose to do so. That would be a good credit rating. You could borrow at an attractive interest rate. Page 6 gives you a little more background on how banks or these national rating agencies, what do they look at when they're evaluating your credit or your borrowing capacity? How are they going to pre-qualify you for a borrowing, so to speak? And I think the easiest thing to look at, less categories, is Moody's up top. It's really 4 key things they look at: economy, financial performance. Are you adding to your fund balance? Or are you spending it down? Do your revenues meet your expenses? Institutional framework is how you're set up under state code. That's the same for every city and town throughout the state. And then number 4 is leverage. That's a fancy way of saying debt. What is your debt outstanding compared to your ability to repay that debt? So just a little bit of perspective in here for you on some of those key categories, right? Financial performance and leverage. Those are the 2 that you have control over. You all have that direct control over those 2 pieces under your budget process. Economy, you do have some control over, but that's more of a longer term control through zoning and economic development initiatives. So really the 2 you have direct control over: financial performance and leverage. Page 7 and 8 give you a little bit of a look at that financial performance piece of it. I'm not going to go through this in detail. You all have a lot of updates on this, I know, but big picture from a lender's perspective, you all maintain a structurally balanced budget. For the last 4 years, your revenues have exceeded your expenditures. That's what we refer to as a structurally balanced budget. You've been adding to fund balance over that time. And that's a positive. That's a good thing from a lender's perspective. That's a checkbox for you all. That would be a positive in their evaluation. Sort of that second big piece that you have control over, we speak to in the next section, starting on page 10. And page 10 is an easy page, quick page. You all do not have any tax-supported debt outstanding. You all have paid off you had some short-term loans outstanding for vehicles. Those have been paid off at this point. You do not have any debt outstanding. So that's a big component of that. No debt is outstanding. Doesn't mean we can't give you a little bit of perspective, though, on what your debt capacity or capital funding capacity could be, what you get pre-qualified for, so to speak, if you chose to borrow to fund capital projects. And we get into that on page 11 a little bit here. And there's typically in the municipal finance world, we have 3 key ratios. The first of which is what we call the 10-year payout ratio. This is a measure of how quickly you are repaying your loan, right? So in our personal lives, when we think about a mortgage, are we going to go out and get a 10-year mortgage, a 15-year mortgage with a rate reset, or are we going to get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? In the municipal world, we typically look at this ratio. What percentage of your debt are you repaying in the first 10 years? If you're borrowing $10 million over 20 years and you repay $5 million over the first 10 years, that's a 50% payout ratio. You're repaying half of your debt over the first 10 years. No real capacity limitations on this, right? There's no measure of how much debt you can borrow. It's just how quickly you're repaying that debt. The other 2 do give us insight into what your capacity could be or your pre-qualified borrowing amount could be. The first is debt to assessed value. How much debt do you have outstanding as a percentage of your tax base? And this is an important category to look at, important ratio that lenders look at. In the middle of the page, we've shown you what the median, the maximum, and the minimum debt to assessed value are for those other North Carolina cities that are rated by Moody's, right? So you can see the median debt to assessed value is about 0.5%. Somebody is as high, AA rated, is as high as 2.6%, and somebody's barely over 0%, right? So that's kind of the range that you're looking at. 0 to 2.5 to 3% is a typical range for this ratio. And so putting that into numbers for you, assuming a revaluation that results in 30% increase next year, that's kind of in line with what the Department of Revenue has been looking at. That would result in about 40.8 million of new debt capacity over the next 5-year period of time. Okay. Second ratio that we look at in this regard is debt service to expenditures. This gets to your annual payment as a percentage of your overall budget, right? What percentage of your budget are you using to make debt payments, both principal and interest? And looking at this ratio, again, same AA rated North Carolina category there in the middle of the page, the median there is closer to 7%, and you've got a range of 0 to 15%. A typical range for this nationwide is in that 0 to 20% range. So looking at this, assuming some growth in your existing budget from 23, your last audited year, and a 15% limitation, that would give you capacity over the next 5 years of about 16%. Or excuse me, $16 million. So, between these two ratios, somewhere in the $16 to $40 million range is where you could potentially see yourselves pre-qualifying, or a reasonable debt limitation for you all at this point in time. What we know, though, is that there's a lot of potential growth. And as that growth comes, this picture changes year to year, right? If you add to your assessed value, if your budget increases from new resources, these ratios also increase over time. Okay, so that's kind of the first leg, debt capacity. The second leg that I wanted to mention to you tonight is, if you want to utilize some of that debt capacity, what are the options that you have available at your disposal? And I think page 13, I want to stop on this page for a minute and talk through some of the options. These are the most common options available for funding capital to North Carolina cities and towns. The last two, revenue bonds and special obligation bonds, are a little specific, right? Revenue bonds are typically limited to utility systems, which is not necessarily what we're talking about this evening, more governmental projects. And then special obligation bonds are a very specific tool that's not utilized that often. So I want to focus on the first three. The first is pay-as-you-go capital, just cash funding of capital projects, not borrowing money. Obviously, no interest associated with that. And that's great, and that's a positive for it. On the flip side, it means you've got to have that cash on hand up front. So if you're funding a smaller project, that makes sense. But if you're funding a much larger project, it could take time to build up that amount to fund that one project, or it could be a major budget hit to you in a certain year, which is where debt funding can be a useful tool if done within reasonable limitations. And if you're looking at debt funding, the two most common types of debt that you could utilize for governmental projects would be general obligation bonds and installment financing agreements. These are statutorily allowed borrowing techniques. The first, a general obligation bond, has to go on a referendum, right? You put it on a referendum, and if it's voted by the citizens, then you can issue those general obligation bonds. The reason that happens is because it's a pledge of the town's taxing power, full faith, credit, and taxing power of the town. That means that there are no rate limitations on repaying the debt. You have to come up with the money to repay those GO bonds. That's the best thing that you can offer a lender. That's going to give you your lowest interest rate. The second most common option, slightly lower interest rate, but slightly higher interest rate, but commonly used, is an installment financing agreement. This is a fancy way of saying a mortgage or a car loan, right? You are pledging an asset here. And this does not require a referendum. It does require a public hearing. And one of the challenges that you have to keep in mind with this is there are collateral requirements, right? You are pledging an asset, so you have to make sure that the bank wants that asset as collateral. So oftentimes, good, what they call essential governmental assets, a town hall, a police station, a fire station. Those are the type of essential government assets that banks or lenders really like to see. On the flip side, street repaving, sidewalk projects, parks and rec, open space land, those type of things become more challenging. Not to say that they can't get done and don't get done as an installment financing, but there aren't as many lenders interested in taking those type of properties as collateral. So oftentimes that's kind of a decision process there. One consideration in that is if you put something on the ballot for a general obligation bond and it's not approved, then you likely don't move forward with funding that project through debt. So something that you absolutely need, if you put it on the ballot and it's not approved, you could find yourself in a tough situation if you still have to fund it. Like to use the example, for counties, if they put a courthouse on the ballot and it's not approved, the judge can still make them build it. And that's a big ticket item, right? So same thing for jails and other essential assets that you are required to provide. So that's another consideration when thinking about a general obligation bond issuance. One other thing that I'll mention along the way here is we're talking about funding capital. 14, you're going to have options, whether you go to a bank or whether you issue what we often call bonds in the public markets. That's public markets is another way of saying issuing municipal bonds. I'm not going to get into that tonight. We'll have plenty of time to do that. But on page 15, another thing that I wanted to mention is you're thinking about funding capital. The local government commission is typically, they're the state oversight board. They typically have to approve all types of debt that you issue as a municipality. And unlike some other states, or perhaps in our personal lives, you can't just decide, hey, I need to go borrow some money, and this is about how much I need to borrow, and I know that I'll be good to fund the project if I get this amount of money. The local government commission has to make certain findings to approve your debt. And one of those findings is the amount you're borrowing is adequate but not excessive. And so in doing that, what they say is we really need to have bids and permits in hand, which for you all means you can't just say, hey, I'm going to go borrow $5 million to fund this group of projects. You really have to have a defined project and have designed that project and have bids in hand before you can borrow. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about borrowing for capital projects, is the timing of when you can borrow for. Okay. Third thing I'm going to mention here, I know I'm going quickly, but third thing I'm going to mention here is what we call the affordability, right? So we go out in our personal lives, we get pre-qualified for a mortgage, and the bank says, I will lend you up to $400,000 to buy a new home based upon what I see, what you provided, your credit score, et cetera. Well, that's great, but I've then got to decide, okay, if I take out a $400,000 mortgage, can I afford it? And I think about, I've got, childcare that I got to take care of. After school care is coming up as they start the school process. Got aging parents that I'm going to have to take care of. I can't afford the monthly payments on a $400,000 mortgage based upon my budget. So I either have to go out and get a second job, or I need to look and have additional revenue, or I need to look at a lower mortgage, right? And that's often where we see the more limiting factor is this affordability side. And affordability may be different if you're thinking about a singular project. You may have a certain project that you want to do, and you look at it and say, yeah, I can afford the payment on that loan. But if you've got another project that you want to do, now you have two projects, you've got to consider those in tandem. The answer to those projects individually may be, yes, I can afford them. but together that affordability may not exist. And that's where capital improvement planning really comes in, looking at your needs as a whole when making those affordability decisions. And so page 17 gives you a little bit of an overview of the characteristics of a capital improvement plan. Big things are identifying projects and having identified funding sources for how you're going to pay for those. And then having you all as a board adopt that plan and revisit it annually, because needs are constantly changing, particularly for a town like yourself that is in the growth. So you all currently have a capital improvement plan. It's a good plan, lays out projects, and it's just something that's going to have to continue to be revisited annually, and consider adding to that a more detailed analysis of that plan, coming up with a longer term funding strategy. And one of the things that I know we've talked about with staff and that we're looking at is two different pieces of the capital plan. One piece is is on page 18, your kind of ongoing vehicles, right? Right now, kind of look at that on a year-to-year basis and determine how much you can afford in that budget year and what the needs are. And one of the things that we'll be talking about going forward is perhaps establishing a more fixed funding for this type of project, where you come up with an amount that's a good starting point that you know meets your minimum needs, and you fund that amount every year. Go ahead and build that into the budget so you know it's taken care of. Becomes more like an operating expense going forward. You know how much you're paying every year. Page 19 is the second component of this. It is what I'll call the major capital projects. And there are one-time projects like building of facilities or parks and rec. And then there are also annually recurring projects, maintaining your existing facilities. You've got to continue to invest in those every year. What we've summarized for you on 19 is your current CIP from the most recent budget. This is going to be reviewed every year. And so I don't want to get into the projects so much this evening, but just big picture, that plan that was the 5-year total was about $23 million. And that plan included 20 million of one-time projects, and then 2.9 million of these annually recurring maintenance type projects. In order to fund that plan, there was about 12.8 million of debt funding identified, right? So that's within those capacity limitations that we talked about, 16 to 40 million. You add 12.8 million, that's under that lowest limit, right? So with that allows us to say, okay, we know we've got the capacity to fund what's currently in the plan. We need to start thinking about affordability going forward. And so in order to do that, I'm going to jump you forward to page 24. Jumped a lot of pages there. But again, we'll be available to talk through this in greater detail. This is a sample. Page 24 is a sample of what an affordability plan could look like. Right now, we know that you don't have any debt outstanding. So you don't have any funding within your current budget to pay for debt because you don't have it. The only thing currently in your budget is some ongoing pay-as-you-go capital dollars. So when we look at funding a $20+ million capital plan and utilizing about 12.8 million of debt as part of that, there are going to be resources in future budgets that are going to need to be identified to fund them. Where that comes from is going to be part of the discussion process going forward. But you can see here on items K and L, it kind of shows you in column K, the annual amount of dollars that would be needed under the current plan. And the question is going to be, where do those dollars come from? And as you revisit the plan, how do those dollars change? One of the things that is going to come to the forefront in this year's budget cycle is revaluation and changes in growth in the tax base, and whether that is going to be sufficient to fund some or all of this. So for a little bit of perspective on that, just a glimpse, so to speak, as before we get into the analysis as part of the budget process. Page 25 shows you the annual sort of what we're calling revenue requirements, those additional dollars that you would need to come up with to fund that plan in column B, and then what that equates to in additional assessed value, right? As your assessed value grows, your tax base grows, your revenue grows with it. And so in order to fund the revenue requirements in column B, you would need to have about 500 to 600 million of new tax base to support those funding requirements. For a little bit of perspective on that, page 26 goes into a little detail for you, and I'll let you read the details of it, but high level in fiscal 25, non-revaluation year, you grew, your growth in your tax base was about 220 million. So that's about half of that requirement in 1 year. So certainly there's the potential that additional growth in the budget could support the current plan as it's laid out today. The question will be, how does that plan evolve throughout the year as you get into the upcoming budget process? So we've laid out for you on page 27, just some high level observations, takeaways as part of this initial analysis and discussion. And the bottom line is you have access to the capital markets. You have capacity to borrow money if you choose to do so as part of the funding capital plan. Question is going to be affordability and where those dollars come from and the availability of those dollars within the budget and future growth. So as we go forward, the tasks ahead of us are collectively are refining the capital plan, identifying your priorities as a board and building those into the capital plan, considering your appetite for debt versus pay-as-you-go capital as part of that plan, and then revising that as part of the upcoming budget process before you implement those projects. Mayor Shipp, I think I went as quick as I could there. But that was high level. Hopefully that's helpful background for you. There's more information in the presentation. Happy to be available to answer, obviously, questions this evening or as we go forward. And I think this will kind of start to come together through the budget and future planning process.
So I think even though we just came into the budget for this fiscal year, we're sort of preparing the budget for next fiscal year already and what that might look like.
What's the timing on that?
Likely due to revisit the CIP, October, November timeframe, to let you all give your input on what the new CIP for the next budget will look like. And then we will use that to fund our findings for the next budget.
And what does that process look like? Are we going to have separate meetings on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, we can include it as part of your regular meeting, or we can have a workshop. It really depends. The bigger piece of this is we're trying to narrow it down to a 5-year kind of window, so that way we don't get too far ahead of ourselves for the 10, 20, 30-year stuff that's way out there. My intent is to try to figure out what that number is that we can afford. Mitch mentioned affordability a bunch of times. What is that number we can afford over the next 5 years without having to have a tax increase? I think that's the number that's important to know. What is our debt capacity going to be over the next 5 years based on the growth, based on not only growth in the town as a whole for tax dollars, but also sales tax and other revenues. And then which project, more importantly from the input from you all, which projects rise to the top of the list? And we're looking at maybe 12 million, 13 million is what we can afford over the next 5 years. So then what projects fit that mold? Right now, no projects, because I think it's far more expensive than it should be. But how do we then pick and choose what we can get fit into that level of funding? And again, that is baseline what our tax rate is now, hoping that the board sees that we hold that tax rate after the rebalance.
Is that, I guess maybe, so our annual growth was that figured at 3%?
think they did 5%.
So for debt service to expenditures, that budget, we assumed 5% over the next 3 years and then reverted back to sort of a average long-term inflationary 3% rate. For the assessed value, we assumed 30% growth through the reval process, and then went back to a natural growth rate. I want to make sure I don't tell you the wrong thing. Natural growth rate of 3% after that fiscal 26 revaluation. It's important to note, right, through the revaluation process, this is where it gets a little tricky, right? If you maintain a revenue neutral rate, you get the benefit of that growth through reval. If you go to a revenue neutral tax rate, kind of eliminates the benefit of that reval growth and will be focused on natural growth from new tax base coming on natural.
If we're a normal town with normal growth projections, this would be a little easier and safer. But because, I mean, if you look on page 26, it's a roller coaster of percentages, as low as 1 and as high as 54%. So as the town continues to grow, if you have another year like you did in 2025 of 22%, we're always going to want to be planning a year behind so we don't get it too far ahead of ourselves from a debt model standpoint.
Yeah, Mr. Franklin and I were talking about it, and as we've been working on this planning process, a lot of times we try to look at this in 5-year chunks and say, let's fund the first 5 years and let's identify the revenue upfront in 1 year, set that, know the plan's funded, and move on through the process, still reviewing it annually. You all, with the levels of growth that you've seen, I mean, 22% in one non-reval year, that's a lot of growth. And so I think for you all, it's going to be a process of developing a plan, knowing what your plan is, but understanding that it's going to have to be revisited annually, and the impacts and the revenue requirements are going to change and evolve as your tax base changes and evolves. And so maybe a little bit of flexibility in that process, more so for you all than others who have a more mature tax base that it isn't growing as quickly.
So with that flexibility, how do we structurally create communication about that? Are you going to be reaching out to us every year? Or so that'll be a formal process.
It'll be a formal addition to the budget process in October, November.
Okay.
We will start doing CIP planning right after you pass the budget that you just passed. We'll go ahead and get started on the next budget. And that's so you all can identify what your priorities are. And we can go get some estimates, see how those fit in the debt model, if things need to get kicked a year, or I think in probably sooner than I feel like. You know, I'm thinking 5 years, but maybe sooner than that, we'll actually be able to pull stuff forward, which is very rare.
Just curious, what is your philosophy on debt?
I don't like it, but it's necessary.
It's necessary to grow. It's necessary to provide services.
That's right.
So how conservative are we looking really?
So Mitch mentioned 2 ways to look at it, right? Debt based on your assessed value. I think that is a terrible metric to use.
I don't have any.
40 million, right? We cannot afford 40 million.
Okay.
But if you look at 15% of your annual expenditures or revenues, that's a better way to do it. I would rather be around 8 to 10%. But I think with the growth that Pittsboro has, I think you could probably go a little bit further out on the limb your first borrow, especially if you had a high priority project that you wanted to get done. I think this discussion was really good because in Pittsboro's past, you haven't taken on debt. It's been 200 grand here, maybe $500,000 here. It's been very small, very manageable pieces of debt. But when you're looking at $7.5 million, $9 million for your first borrow, that's a big chunk, especially at 5% interest, which is unfortunate. So that's why the priority from you all is very important. And then making sure that we always look a year behind so that way we don't get ahead of ourselves.
Once we have our credit confirmed or approved, will our rating go up
a lot goes into that, right? You know, some of that, like we talked about, you all will have control of throughout the budget process. Do you maintain strong fund balance? Do you adopt and manage a structurally balanced budget?
Because we want to borrow money as cheaply as possible. That's my goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think when and if you need to establish your rating, if we go out and borrow money from a bank this time, if that's determined that that's the best cost-effective approach for you all for your first borrowing, whatever that may be, and whenever it may be, you still don't need to get a credit rating. It's not until you go out and you issue municipal bonds, securities in the public markets that you would have to get a credit, right? So I think, you know, big picture economy is 30% of the rating. And so let's, all things being equal, you take care of the things that you control, finance, debt management, you do a good job with that. I think economy, if the growth materializes that's expected, you would be more on an upward potential trajectory on your rating, because that's 30% of the rating. But as with everything I know y'all are talking about, it just depends on how things evolve. And I know that's hard, but I think that's where, you know, Mr. Franklin mentioned, you know, this process, revisiting it annually. And with these capital projects, you know, until you sign a contract, right, to fund with a contractor to start building, you have the ability to pause that project, right? So you plan based upon the growth that's expected, but if it doesn't materialize, you're revisiting this annually as part of the budget. You may say, hey, we had planned to start this project next year, but we're not quite there yet. We're not quite ready. So we're going to push it out another year on the CIP. The touch points of revisiting this annually are going to be an important process as you all go forward. Just as likely you see major growth and it happens quickly in a year, you may see the need for some of these projects moving forward sooner, and you may have the ability to do that because your tax base and economy is growing more quickly.
Yeah, because this first couple will likely be installment financing, which won't require a bond rating. You just go to a bank with your projects and the LGC, and then you move forward. Similar to what we did with the vehicles in this budget year.
Sure.
Very similar to that.
Baby steps.
There's always the opportunity, if there was a project that you all as a whole say, we want this done, and then Heather says we can't afford it, there's always the opportunity to increase your tax rate for that specific project. But then it's stuck in there for as long as the loan is there. That's why we're focused on what can we afford with the tax rate as it is.
Like to hear that.
You would.
One other thing, this will not affect our, trying to get out of here, I think we're at 365 days, maybe a year and a half of that we have money to, if we don't get any more monies, that we will be able to run the town. That's in our reserve, right?
Yes, sir.
So this will not affect that amount of money or that time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Some of the projects are slated as cash projects. That cash is either cash as in cash that's received that year that's been spent on a project, or it's cash from fund balance. Like we say all the time, we don't want to use cash for recurring expenses like salaries, programs. You want to use those for brick and mortar projects. Mainly, we're looking at that at cash in the current year, not cash from the previous year. Although currently, we are doing a little bit of that. We did a little bit of that last year. We'll likely do a little bit of that in the next year until the revenue is high enough to where we can accomplish the goals that we want, that you all want, without having to dip into our savings account. But you all financially, Pittsboro is financially very strong. No debt. You got a decent amount of money in the bank, and good processes in place.
And I think going forward, as this plan develops and you go forward in time, right? If you continue to add to that fund balance, you get to the point where you're comfortable at your current level of fund balance. You don't necessarily need to keep increasing once you get to that level. At that point, you say, okay, I don't want to pull down our fund balance below this level, but anything above that, it's reasonable to look at spending on one-time capital projects, non-recurring, right? Because you can only spend it once. So capital projects are oftentimes one of those things that you look at once you get over that level of fund balance you're comfortable with, then you start thinking about pulling that into this CIP process. And in doing so, like Mr. Franklin said, you do that looking back, not looking forward. You don't spend future fund balance. You wait until it's in the bank, audited, you know what the amount is, and then you all as a board can determine, here's the amount of fund balance I'm comfortable transferring over to be spent on capital, knowing that I still have a very healthy, comfortable level.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And Heather and I's goal is to have enough money in fund balance where anything that is on wheels, we just pay cash. Anything big, that's when you go out and get a loan, you pay for it over time.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you all. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Mitch.
Okay, up next, we have a few public hearings. The first one is a rezoning request, PB 24-127 for Robeson's Walk, conditional rezoning. I will take a motion to go into the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Second,
Second.
Commissioner Foley.
Okay.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. It's a dead.
Thank you.
Good evening. Just having a little bit of a local problem tonight. We're going to see how we do. In your packet tonight, let me get the map up in just a second. In your packet tonight, there is a legislative request by Pittsboro Place, WEHLP. It's been submitted for petitioning for a map amendment, rezoning all 208 acres that you see in front of you, which amounts to 22 parcels from the current classification of M2 heavy industrial to C2CZ, which is highway business conditional zoning, and MRCZ, which is multi-family residential conditional. The purpose of a conditional rezoning, as I'm pretty sure you're familiar with since we've been doing an awful lot of it, is to actually go in and you don't just rezone, but you actually assign conditions to the project according to how it is broken up. So in this particular case, they intend to utilize the site for highway business. What is identified here as Pod E. It's really off closest to East Street, which is Highway 64 business. And then you have a mixed-use residential area for townhomes and single family. That's Pod B, C, and D, which amounts to 111.9 acres. And then there's a pod at the back that's green. It's approximately 72.67 acres, and it's going to be donated to the town as a park. So this proposed site is shown in the land use plan designated as an employment mixed use and employment traditional neighborhood with an identified mixed use activity center. And basically this is a redesign of a 2019 project. This is actually a complete redesign. Major improvements include more intense density for residential and a dedicated commercial pod. So the conditions themselves appear in your package after the consistency statement. And I'm ready for questions, or I can certainly introduce the petitioner. Or both. How about that?
Let's hear from the petitioner.
Sure, and good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Board of Commissioners. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm an attorney at the Morningstar Law Group, representing the owners of the property for this rezoning, along with Laura Holloman McAdams, who's right here. First, I want to start by thanking Director Coon-Dingle, not only for the presentation, and not only Director, but also staff here in the town for working with us through this project. We've got a lot of feedback and guidance from them. We've spent a lot of time with staff here shaping this project, which we're very proud of. I think all of you, many of you are familiar with this property and the fact that there was a project that was considered in 2019 on the same property. And at that time, I think you all probably are aware that the town was having some really major discussions related to sewer capacity and comprehensive planning. And so that project didn't move forward, but a lot of those questions have been answered a lot further down the road on those. So we've been able to use the feedback not only from the previous project, but also from the comprehensive plan and working directly with staff to put together a project that is much more, and we believe consistent with the vision for the town of Pittsboro and also the feedback that we've received. I think when we talk about this property or this rezoning, the first place that I want to start is what is currently zoned, which is for industrial. And I think we all can agree that that is not the zoning for this parcel, for this property, given what it could be and what it is slated to be in the comprehensive plan. As has been mentioned, the comprehensive plan calls this area out for employment mixed use, traditional neighborhood, and downtown support and open space. And I think this particular piece of property, or this project anyway, hits on all cylinders there. Specifically, the property has very little frontage on Business 64 there, but that is the area that we've slated for the non-residential piece to give that the downtown support kind of space there, allow for non-residential and commercial opportunities. Then from a traditional neighborhood standpoint, as has been explained to us, traditional neighborhood is a neighborhood where, you are in close proximity to the things that you might need. And this project provides that by placing the housing next to the non-residential uses. And then, of course, there's the open space component, which is pretty significant on this piece of property. We have slated about 72 acres for a park. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Laura Holloman, to go into a little bit more of the details. Really, this project has been pieced together over time. I mean, this isn't just our first stab at it. It's been over time since 2019 and through many meetings with staff, with the community, and planning board. We really think that this project has come full circle and really is giving you all many of the things, almost all of the things that the town is looking for and for future development generally, but also specifically for this property. Laura, if you want to go into more detail.
We have to. Good evening, Laura Holm with McAdams, the project planner for this property and project. And I just want to thank Randy Calhoun Tingle for being here tonight. I know he's been under the weather and he wanted to see to it personally that he present this project because this has been a testament to him and his staff as well. So I first brought this project before you all from my basement in 2020 when I presented this about 4 years ago, and happy to be able to deliver it face to face tonight. At that time, there was a lot of good discussion. I believe you all said it was a good, decent project, but it was time for Pittsboro to have a great project. So at that time, you said, hey, I know that you own this project. Can you sit and wait for us to really develop a vision for this property, for the area around it, for our sewer plan, to get going and to understand that a little bit more? And so we waited, and we waited for about 2.5 years for this vision to be realized. And so for the better part of the year, we've now moved forward with this active rezoning that you see before you tonight. And it's really a testament to the standard that Pittsboro has become within that short time. Right now, you've got a developer that's voluntarily willing to donate just under 73 acres for a public park. We've worked with the town manager, and we've worked with the Parks and Recreation here in Katie about what that looks like. And during the middle of the process, they said, "Hey, we love the fact that you're willing to donate this and to, we envision this as a passive park, but can you work with us to build, the parking lot? Can you work with us to build public bathrooms for this amenity?" Yes, we'll be glad to. Let's sit and talk about that. Then we knew that the planning staff was working on developing a sense of place for folks heading into downtown. Well, can you work with us on donating a linear park area along Highway 64 Business? Yes. So we added that to the commitment. So really, can you work with us of making sure there's pedestrian connection between the plant and ultimately this project? Yes, we'll want that in. So we've really tried to respond as best we can and really tried to put our best foot forward and recognize that we want this to be a high quality development. We want this to be anything like this town has ever seen. And we really want to show that we're working with you all, and we're not trying to press up against a deadline, obviously. We really want to sit here and get this right, but at the same time, we're really ready to move forward. We think that the time is now for this property to be developed. We've also added a great component of affordable housing, committing to a total of a minimum of 120 residential units that are going to be committed as income restricted dwelling units. And that's really a strong affordable housing commitment that we worked specifically with staff on. And Teresa says she's been working with the affordable housing strategy and working with her to make sure that that was really putting the best foot forward. So I want to thank her for that. The issues last time was, this isn't dense enough. Where are you appropriately planning for density and more attainable housing? So we've eliminated single family detached as a result of that. Where's the commercial guarantee? Before this was an entire planning development. How do we know that the commercial is going to be appropriately in an appropriate area and have appropriately transition areas between the more environmentally sensitive areas? So now we've come forward with the split zoning. So we've designated have a commercial area as staff said in the front. We've also worked with them on scaling back commercial uses so that the more intensive uses like a car lot or car repair service aren't allowed. So and that's as much for the town as it is for us, because obviously if we build those obnoxious uses next to the highway, the residential in this development will suffer. So we're really trying to make sure that it's harmonious for everybody, for who's existing there with the plant, for who's going to be in the future, and for the commercial viability along Highway 64 and East Street. Also, the third thing was, what's the community benefit? And this is how kind of the town park was realized. Those discussions started. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have, but really just happy to be here and see this labor of love get to this point tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Board have any questions?
I have one. As everyone knows, the parkland is very special to us. We had some parkland dedicated to the town that's not been very feasible, meaning the topography. And I see an existing pond here with a 200-foot pond buffer. Is that our ordinance for 250-foot pond buffer, or?
We basically wanted to make sure that we had a large enough buffer so that way the residential they were building was far enough away from the pond so that way we could utilize that as access. Because I think it was 100 feet previously. So we asked them to increase it to 200 feet. So that way the town park had more space around that pond.
And is the land there, I'm just going to say maybe fairly level for grading purposes or anything?
There are sections that are level and there are sections that are not. I think that was our approach here would be, this would be more of a natural park. And we have got a proposal to go ahead and start the park planning on this so we can figure out what it is that we're going to use it for. I think this park particularly, or this land particularly, we didn't go into it thinking that we were going to build softball and soccer fields on it. Because there are some low areas, there's some wet areas, there's a creek, there's some probably markings that'll be of historical significance. So all of those things we just have to flesh out during the planning process.
Markings would be of historical significance.
Along that creek bed, we think there were 2 mills. The property, it used to be a 700-acre tract, and then that was divided in half, I think, along the creek bed. And then the 2 owners north and south of the creek had, we believe they both had a mill. At least that's what Cy researched last week. So I think, and I believe the mayor walked back there and took some pictures of these large stone walls that are still existing. So we'd love to try to do something with historical preservation in that, or historical education, if we in fact have some old mill sites that are back there. So that's why we're pretty excited about getting the planning part going, so the park planning professionals can really give us an idea of best use.
I believe back in my younger days, there used to be what we used to call a little flower farm back there. Okay,
Yeah, and this,
that's part of it or what?
I don't want to date you, but yes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, you can see the I don't know if it was satellite back then, but you could see where all the different, I guess, small fields of flowers were and how they had played out. And that pond had been there ever since then, that point. So that pond's been there for years.
In reference to a park, I'm not really, if it's a natural, that's fine. But there are a lot of wetlands in this particular area, streams and things like that. So it would be good to go to the natural in terms of a park, if that's what we decide to do. But yes, I'm like Commissioner Farrell. It was a flower farm. They had beautiful flowers. And so that might date me, but that's okay too. I lived in Pittsboro all my life, other than college. So I love the place.
And I don't think it would take a whole lot of convincing to get Katie to do a flower farm.
Take a lot of work. But yes, I was just wanted to put that in because that is a lot of wetlands over there.
The one thing that I don't know if was mentioned in the conditions is 2,500 linear feet of greenway. And that will go from the property line all the way, probably down the property line, some through some of the roads, but that's a lot of greenway for this project. So I think the Haley Group might have to get a little inventive on where these go. So we'll see what that turns out when they turn their plans in. That
2,500 feet, you said?
Linear feet, yes, sir.
One thing I just wanted to mention too is when we first met, the first meeting, I think we said, yeah, we want about 80 acres for a park, and that wasn't initially in the concept plan. So when we talk about the density in appropriate places and higher buildings and how that could work out. So we appreciate that. And then also I talked about how the plant that's there is an amenity already. And a lot of these developments try and create something that they wish was like the plant, but it's not. And so that is, something that is already a benefit to our community. And then this benefits that, and appreciate all the work that they've done with them and planning and coordination to make sure that access and all of those things are still available while this development would happen.
So I did receive a letter expressing concern about the timing of the transfer of the park. And I think I know how to respond to this person, but I'd like to know from staff perspective, why would we want to take possession of the parkland immediately rather than wait until completion of much of the development that would utilize that park as an amenity?
The short answer, or the best answer I have tonight, is that the parking lot and the restrooms are going to be installed early on. We do have capacity that would cover the needs of the 2 restrooms or whatever else. There is a demonstrated need in the case of the plant, and I certainly don't want to speak for the plant, but let me just say, when they have events currently, there is a deficit of parking. And so our having ownership and getting the parking lot launched quickly and providing restroom facilities at or around that parking lot itself would be a mutually beneficial amenity to both. Waiting until the 500th house or the 500th unit. In planning circles, that's considered pretty common stuff. But in this particular case, I believe in striking while the iron's hot.
We think we can utilize and activate this park pretty quickly with minimal programming, but nonetheless, we think we can get it activated pretty quickly.
And it also seems that the kinds of parks that we would be planning in this area might be a little bit less maintenance expensive and less intensive in terms of maintenance expense than a splash pad.
Oh, yes.
100%.
Every day of the year.
Yeah. We see this as a place you might go park. For a short time, we would have Porter Johns, but you could park and then go take your dog for a hike or go for a hike yourself, or Paul could take his mountain bike through the woods or through the area through there and start mapping our trails out for us. So we think for pretty low cost, we can get it started.
Very good.
Any other questions? Take a motion to close the public hearing. No one from the public was signed up to speak at this public hearing, so I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Commissioner Bonitz, thank you. Second?
Second.
Commissioner Foley? Is there any further discussion?
Make a motion to approve Robeson Walk conditional rezoning and the consistency statement.
Thank you. Commissioner Farrell, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bonitz, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very
Thank you all.
much.
Congratulations
Thank you so much for your hard work, friends.
and your patience.
Okay, up next is a rezoning request, PB 24266 for 44 North Carolina Highway 902. And I think Teresa.
Thank you and good evening. I'm filling in for Randy Cahoon-Tingle tonight. The applicant who is here tonight is requesting a general use rezoning from residential 10 to C2, which is highway commercial, for the property located at 44 NC Highway 902. The biggest difference between general use rezonings and conditional rezonings is if approved, you cannot require any additional conditions to this request. So it's just a straight, you're going from one zoning district to the next. So you typically see conditional rezoning. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood this was not that tonight.
I'll take a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
Commissioner Foley, second, Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So the property is located adjacent and south of Al's Diner and near the intersection of NC Highway 902 and 64 Business. The current use of the property is single-family detached dwelling. Adjacent properties include single-family dwelling units to the south and west of the property, a restaurant to the north, and a car wash and restaurant across the street. Regarding the zoning, the adjacent properties are currently zoned R10 and C2 highway commercial. The surrounding area is zoned a mixture of R10, R12, C2, and O&I, which is office institutional. The rezoning request to highway commercial is consistent with the mixture of land uses in the area. It is consistent with the intent of the highway commercial zoning district, the purpose of which is to provide lands to accommodate retail, office, and service areas that serve the town and the region. Development allowed in the C2 district includes a mixture of retail, office, eating, entertainment, medical, vehicle sale, service uses that serve the community-wide needs, can also include freestanding business establishments and shopping centers. Speaking a little to the future land use map, it identifies the site as downtown support, future land use classification, which is which the requested rezoning to highway commercial C2 is compatible with the future land use designation. The rezoning request to highway commercial would be compatible with the downtown support classification, which includes areas located with convenient access to US 64 Business and Hillsborough Street, adjacent and outside of the town center's classification district. So this property falls within that and is consistent with it. The site is located adjacent to 902 It's near another major thoroughfare being 64 Business West. It's located near other non-residential uses. The property has access to public water and sewer. It's already located in the city limits. So all of this provides practicality, easy access, and reduced travel times. The site is also located within the downtown support classification near other properties within the downtown support. So that's indicated by that pink color that's on that map that was handed out to you tonight. So the downtown support provides for housing options and non-residential uses. Focus as a transition zone to lower density areas. It's identified by 4 minor gateways. One of those gateways is the intersection of 902 and 64 Business. So it falls right within that gateway going into the downtown support area. Regarding goals of the land use plan, it meets several of the goals, including encouraging growth near existing infrastructure. It also meets the land use plan suitability maps. So towards the back of the plan, you'll see that there's a residential suitability map and then a commercial suitability map. So this intersection is identified to be more suitable for commercial. Regarding comprehensive plans, the requested rezoning is consistent with the land use plan and other adopted comprehensive plans. The comprehensive transportation plan, bike and ped plan, and also the Parks and Rec master plan. So the planning board met on June 17th and recommended approval in a vote of 6-1. There was not a reason stated for the dissenting vote. And after closing the public hearing, staff recommends approval of the request and the land use plan consistency statement. So thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions. The applicant is here as well if you have questions for her.
Thank you. There was no one signed up to speak for the public, so I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Commissioner Bonitz.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Foley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. One question from me, and then, so this property is the limit of the downtown support area in the land use plan,
Sir.
correct? And then it's residential next to it?
It is, it's on the boundary line between 2 different land use classification areas.
Any questions for Teresa or the applicant?
I don't exactly have a question, but the property now is considered residential. Is that correct?
Correct.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just make a comment. A couple years ago, we had an incident like this on Main Street where a business moved in, and I believe Mayor Perry was there, and it was up on right beside the French Connection. A lady that owned the business came in there and put an accounting business in there, and it was residential. And to me, it seems like we're kind of headed in the same direction, that we're trying to push commercial up in a residential area. It's residential area behind it off of Thrift Street, and it's numerous residentials, I guess, to the south. So I'm not really in support of this. A half acre commercial property, where we're going to have parking. That would be one question. I'd want to know how much space you're going to need for parking, what is going to be there. I know it's a very small home there now. Are we allowed to, since it's just a rezoning, to ask what may go there?
Well, if it's
I know what can go there in a C2.
regarding the parking, they have to meet, any proposed use has to meet all UDO standards for off-street parking. So that's just going to be based on the proposed square footage and what that proposed use is to how many parking spaces are required. So office space is, for example, 1 space for 300 square feet. So we would just have to look at it at that time and make sure that all the standards are met.
I understand it's just a rezoning. I feel like that we're just, what's gonna be next, the lot next door, they're gonna be here in a year and want to rezone their property, and we're gonna move on down till we be down to the old Golston Road. But that's my comment.
I think the main difference here, and especially from the past, is with the land use plan update last year. That's when we defined that at that time anyway, like where these lines are, and this is the line for that to, stop that creep, so to speak. And so I think that having a freshly updated land use plan makes this more
We
reasonable.
have changed that land use plan numerous times.
We have a few times.
Absolutely.
And I think that it is, I'm trying to think of that. This is, we've been doing a lot of conditional rezonings because we didn't, potentially in cases because we didn't have a land use plan updated. And so now that we do, I think there's some more opportunity for rezonings like this, where they meet the land use plan and the current zoning does not. And there's probably other ways to go zoning that way as well.
Well, this particular area is traditional residential. And basically that is some natural occurring affordable housing. If they are in the houses in that particular area, they're not inexpensive, but that is a very nice residential area. And so basically I am not in favor of rezoning.
Have we notified all the congruent properties around
Yes, sir.
by policy, correct?
Yes, sir. Well,
There's no one here.
I would, yes. That is a requirement of the UDO, so I'm sure it was done. I was asked to fill in today, so I was not the one to actually send the letters, but yes, sir.
I'm Paula Stafford, so thank you, the applicant. And I did personally send letters to everyone, and I received 2 emails back that were supportive feedback. The car wash, which the car wash and the restaurant now, the Hawaiian barbecue, because it's picked up the driveway where they come out is the driveway to this house. There is a family living there, and we have no immediate plans for the property, and they will continue to live there until such time as we think that it fits with the town's planning as downtown support, because this is the line. And but those letters were sent, and no one is here tonight. And there's been a sign actually in the yard of the family for over a month now. So anybody who wanted to be could be here, but there has not been any push. And it's a half an acre, but it is in the land. And the driveway, they really come out to one another. If you've been there, it's next to Al's with a lot of traffic next to this property. So.
Ms. Stafford, it's a pleasure to meet you. We might have met once before, but it's a pleasure to see you. And I appreciate seeing the face behind the business name. I will confess that at first blush, the corporate entity name had me thinking that was indicative of the use. And so I had to read further, and I've gotten past that. I understand this is just a rezoning, and so we're not talking about the uses at this point.
No, the name I gave it about 15 years ago, and that's my fault, because I couldn't, every time I went for Carolina Girls or something like that, I got denied. So I came up with Urban and Wine, but it has nothing to do with the use of this property.
Well, you and your family have made significant investments in town, and so much of what you've done, I think, is really commendable. And for that reason, I think we have, at least in myself, you've established a level of trust that is uncommon with other developers who come to us, or property owners even. And I get the impression that you don't have any immediate plans.
Don't. And I'll just say for those who don't know me, I am a North Carolina native and I've been in Chatham County for 28 years and this is my home. And we have tried to do the development that we've done in the county in line with where we want to live. And so I think we've shown that. So thank you for recognizing that.
And the south of the courthouse project is it's a lovely space and it's a real nice feature and attractive new spot for town. And it's very different. It's very different from what we've had in the past. But it has definitely revived downtown in a distinct way. As I understand it, this rezoning really would complement a collection of properties that you have adjacent and allow for future thinking, perhaps even in a similar vein, if only in comprehensiveness and magnitude. I mean, the SoCo properties all tie together. They work together. And it's very clear that a lot of thought was put into that. We all enjoy eating at Al's Diner, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon.
Yes, sir.
But I also appreciate that we need to put commercial somewhere. And Commissioner Foley, notwithstanding your concerns, I hear them, and I'm reassured by Mayor Shipp's statement that this is a pretty clear delineation of where that downtown support zone would stop. I do want to ask staff, I'm curious about the line bisecting tract 8016. It looks to cut it in half, but I'm just assuming that the entirety of that property would be zoned as downtown support.
So,
I know it's not immediately relevant to this
right,
question, but
not 100% sure why I didn't follow the property lines. I do know that this intersection is considered a gateway. So I think they were trying to provide that buffer for suitable commercial uses in that downtown support area. So I think it was more of just showing that buffer, and maybe coming out that far might have been more than what the consulting group was wanting to propose, but.
There's also the distinction there between the zoning and the plan. So that's a line on the plan that would guide.
It's not the zoning district.
it just guides
District.
It just guides. It's
Correct.
not dictative or dictating. The other thoughts that we've had, Commissioner Farrell, goes to the number of units of housing that we have. And Commissioner Baldwin, you addressed this concern as well. This is naturally occurring affordable housing. And we do have a limited number of those units in town proper. And I'm not real eager to see those get bulldozed. On the flip side, I personally would like to see more opportunities to buy things in town proper rather than having to get in my car to go everywhere when I go spend money. So that's why I've after a lot of thought, I've come out in favor of rezoning this as commercial. And so those are my thoughts.
I have a thought also. I work with the Downtown Advisory Board with your husband, and I appreciate his efforts there and his feedback and this. And I also agree with what Commissioner Bonitz said about the havoc in that area downtown. A strong downtown is important. So I just want to add that.
Any other questions?
So I think that I'll go ahead and move for approval. A motion to approve map amendment PB, no, excuse me, that's the wrong one.
24266.
24266 R10 to C2 at the address of 44 North Carolina Highway 902. And there's the actual statement here. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Motion to approve map amendment PB 24266 and the accompanying consistent statement as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Foley, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. I will vote aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is our action items. And there's a request from the ABC board to retain funds.
Sorry, I thought I was next again.
You are,
The board appointments.
oh,
That's later.
that's
Okay.
next. Yeah.
Sorry.
Amy?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Fiocco. I'm Chair of the Pittsboro ABC Board, and I'm here on behalf of the board to ask if we may retain some of our excess working capital. This is an agreement that the town and the ABC Board had in the past, and the pandemic happened, and that has kind of fallen off the schedule. So I'd like to revisit it and to request that we can retain some of the earnings that we typically would give 100% to you. We did that last year and we've done it many years, but in some years we've been allowed to retain some of those excess working capital dollars, and we've been able to build a fund so that we have to have a specific reason, we have to have your permission, but our reason would be to set up yet another location. Thanks to you, we did submit and get approval from the North Carolina ABC Commission to have a second location. We hope to sign that lease in this coming week. So we're trying to plan yet further into the future, as much as the town is doing with your capital improvement, with your capital fund. So we can't move forward without money. So we're trying to rebuild our savings account, basically. And we do have some ideas on how to not be solely relying on the town for that and asking for retained earnings, but we do need to start saving again to continue planning. We don't know how much we're talking about yet because our audit is underway. The calculations are fairly complicated. I'm happy to share, it's been shared with you on the past, and I'm happy to reshare that with you after this meeting. So I'm just asking for a general agreement, and I would love to also just put it on the regular calendar to revisit each year, ideally earlier in the in the calendar year. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any idea on the timeline for the third store?
We're hoping, as you know, Pittsboro is growing and opportunities come up. It would not be more than 3 years. I think it would be, in the two to 3 year plan. Certainly not as long as 5. But we want to be ready to be able to strike when the iron is hot. Our goal is the profitability of a retail location is always helped if you can own your location. So we own our first store, we'll be renting our second. And the idea is maybe we can do a rent to own or some kind of,
self-financing in a way to get a third location and make more money for the town.
Ms. Fiocco, thank you very much for the memo. It really explained things very well. Thanks for reiterating that. I very much applaud the ambitions to own the property. Spot on. I also appreciate that you and the board and management are already thinking several moves ahead. Your chess game is spot on. And I think that's right also, because I think that we need to be ready for that growth. I also will express some, I wouldn't even use the word discomfort, but the importance of these revenues for the education, the anti-drug and alcoholism education program is really important to me. And I want us to continue that and expand that. But I also don't want us to miss out on opportunities.
To be clear, we would not be affecting any of the 7% that automatically by statute goes to alcohol education. And they do have wonderful programming. If you ever have the opportunity to hear from them, I agree. It's really important.
Good to know. Thank you. I'm generally in support.
And to be clear, we have by statute, every quarter, we have money that we automatically give to the town. And at the end of the year, if there's something called, hopefully, excess working capital. And after a series of calculations by the auditor, which is happening right now, they have to go through, again, by statute, some calculations as to what is truly excess. We have to retain, I believe it's 2 months of working capital, just, safe business practices. And if there's any money left over, we give that to the town as well. And we're asking if we can keep 40% of that at the end of this year and to revisit it each year. You can always ask for it back, which has happened in the past. We've retained it and the town said, oh no, we need money. And we've given it back. It is your money when you want it, but we would like to invest it in making you even more money. I'm hoping and feel it's a good investment for the dollars.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I'll take a motion to approve the Pittsboro ABC Board retaining 40% of excess working capital for the Restricted Capital Improvements Fund.
So moved.
Commissioner Farrell.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Bonitz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Keep it up.
Right. So this may be you again, but up next is a appointment to the Board of Adjustment.
There is one BOA open position for an in-town member. There was one application received for this. Walter F. Harris, who is a former member. His application is attached. And after discussion, staff recommends appointing Mr. Harris to the Board of Adjustments as an in-town member with a term ending December 31st, 2027.
Make a motion to approve Mr. Walter Harris to the Board of Adjustments.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrell. Second, Commissioner Bonitz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And up next is Planning Board appointment.
So due to a recent planning board member resigning, there is a town representative vacancy. So it's customary to appoint the current alternate members. And this is Christina Piard. And the term would expire December 31st, 2025. Her application is attached. And after discussion, staff recommends appointing Ms. Piard as the town representative on the planning board.
I did want to say quickly, current chair Eric Braun is who has resigned. and long-serving, I don't know how long he's been on, but long-serving member of the board, so appreciate his service. And at least 8 years when I was on.
He served as chair for 5.
So anyway, appreciate his long service.
Absolutely.
Understand, moving on to other things.
I'll make a motion to appoint Christina Piard as town representative to the planning board.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonitz.
A second.
Second, Commissioner Foley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do not have a closed session this evening, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin, second, Commissioner Bonitz. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.